2 on Tuesday, May 16th. Roll call of directors, please.
Bauman. Here. Gorman.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Hermaning.
Here.
Kaiser.
Here.
Maple. Stankowski. Here. Calandra Zebro. Here. Kelly Zebro.
Here.
Student Rep Addison. Here. All present.
Okay. Item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4, approval of the agenda. I will seek a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion by Kelly, is there a second?
Second.
A second by Amy. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 5, approval of the minutes. 5A, the regular Board of Education meeting, April 18th, 2023. If there are no corrections, I would seek a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes for
I'll second.
April 18th.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Kelly and a second by Peter. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 5B, the Board of Education reorganizational meeting, April 24th, 2023.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Amy and a second by Kelly. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 6, Student Board Report.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, we're quickly approaching the end of this school year. Kids are excited for summer and can't wait for finals and AP testing to be over. Seniors are soon graduating on May 26th and have their award ceremony on the 24th. Seniors are also signing up to do speeches for graduation. On the other side of things, our Student Senate is holding elections for next year, which I personally am really excited about. FFA had their annual banquet last week and elected new officers. Skills USA got 10th place in state for engineering. Our Mosinee track team has been doing amazing with over 65 PRs in our meet at Wassa West, and we went to conference today. I'd like to say thank you to the board and the community members for supporting me while I held this position. I've learned a great deal from you all and greatly appreciate that I got the opportunity to do this. If any of you are interested, I'm currently looking for a summer job. But again, I'd like to say thank you very much, and I hope to see you all next year.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7A, recognition of student board representative. Ms. Addison, I want to, on behalf of the board, thank you very much for your service.
We have a little gift for you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Addison. I think a round of applause. Thank you.
Item 7B, facilities improvement vision for the future. Okay.
You could pull up the concept picture to start, Christy. Can you blow that up a little bit? Right here is good. Right there, right there. So we're gonna team this presentation up a little bit. It'll be myself at the start with the vision and where we're going with this big picture. Then Steve Kaiser, Mr. Kaiser, will take over on the second link. Then we have a friend of ours from Milwaukee, I believe. Mr. Mullen from Baird will take the debt part of it and school finance part of it. So he'll be here for that third leg of the presentation. Big picture. Couple of the big ideas here, and this is just a vision, this is discussion only, so there's no stress for a vote or anything like that. So feedback is very important in a visioning scenario. Our oldest kitchen in the district is actually in the high school. We replaced an old kitchen in the middle school and built the new commons. So a big idea here is several big things. Moving the kitchen from where it is down over here to this zone. Reworking a commons, our existing high school commons would still exist, but it would become a fitness center, and we'd centralize our fitness center and weight room. Another piece, a big piece, is career and technical education. We have many grants and donations and lots of great things going on in our CTE programs at the high school and middle school. but we're out of space and we need to grow that zone. So a big part of this is a lot of space increases for autos repairs, woods, doubling our metals space, all things that are needed from career and technical education. Almost half of our students are engaged in these sorts of things, and it's something I've mentioned to a few businesses in the community. It's definitely a big need for our district, big picture vision. The existing locker rooms are in disrepair. They're some of the worst locker rooms that exist, and I've replaced locker rooms in other districts. They're pretty bad. So we would replace those here. We'd keep the existing gym. So the existing gym, there was a lot of work and a lot of commitment from the community. That would stay. But we would essentially, that little white building in the back, we're going to be using our existing land. So you wouldn't need to purchase any land. We're essentially using our existing footprint to create a CTE area, a new commons, new locker rooms that are needed, and then also a new kitchen right here. So a new kitchen, which is also needed. We built the middle school commons the way that we built it because we knew that the high school kitchen is failing. We know that that's on its last leg, right? We've already had to replace some things and to kind of get along. One underlying piece that would happen in any existing zone is final asbestos abatement, right? A lot of these zones, it's not dangerous asbestos, means it's non-friable. Either have friable or non-friable asbestos. So in the zones here that are rebuild, the asbestos would be cleaned out, similar to what we did in all the high school bathrooms and that sort of thing, right? Or what we already did in the old middle school commons. So the big things, new CT areas, new kitchen, new commons, secure entries. So we would move the high school office to the back, the current back, make that the front, and then move district offices to the existing high school offices. Everything would have secure entrances and the centralized community fitness center, along with more gym space if you choose to go with that particular option. Why is this a lighter color over here? When we move to the next part of the presentation with Mr. Kaiser, there's two different ways that we looked at this. Everything in darker purple, essentially, most of that, it's about 19 million, 20 million for that. If you add on the athletic facilities, a new gym, new locker rooms, and wrestling mezzanine, it's an additional 10 million roughly. Steve will get into the specifics of that. So this is a big picture, and you have all these details in front of you, along with, you know, the reasons why, and that sort of thing. But big picture questions at this point, we looked at coming at this with our existing land, and looking at high needs areas, things that needed to be completed. The strategic plan, this is dialed in with the top item in the strategic plan. Where are we looking at with facilities, and how are we finishing and using our district dollars to the best of our ability in order to have the best facilities that we can possibly have for our students and our staff. And we think that this is it. This is a vision. Obviously, a vision can be adjusted along the way. I've already had feedback from staff members already. I've met with several who've talked about they've had really good ideas that are easy adjustments here and there to make on future drawings. This is just a concept drawing. Nothing is set in stone. Questions before I turn things over to Mr. Kaiser?
So you said a fitness area, so would that replace the one that's in the middle school right now?
Yeah, yes. So this is the existing cafeteria. So that's the existing high school cafeteria. What we're doing this summer, the board already approved, making, 7 of you were at the event last night, so you saw the new floor in the commons. That exact floor is being put in the high school in about a month. The high school, this is the current cafeteria here, okay? So we're doing that for two reasons. We're going to have a cafeteria there next year for the high school students. But if we move forward with this, it's a perfect floor and a perfect location for a centralized fitness center. You know, right now we do have a fitness center that's open to the community and our students, but it's in a very remote part of our building structure. If you're going to get to it, there's not great parking. If you're in the building, it's quite the hike to get through to where it is. This would centralize everything right in our current area with parking that's directly adjacent. So that's a good question. Other questions? All right, I'm sure more will come up. Mr. Kaiser, why don't we jump to the second PDF? Thank you, Christie.
So just to piggyback on a few things that Dave mentioned, you know, looking at our site, basing off the strategic plan requirements that were asked for us to take a look at, we know our site's very compressed and very tight. So we looked at the avenues to be able to maximize everything we possibly can to the limits the city would allow us to. And one thing that, without really getting into depth, when you look at how our existing site lays today, we have some severe elevation changes out there. And that's a big problem when you start matching buildings up. And we had that issue in a couple different spots, even from 96 we do. And that being said, we want to negate that at all possible. And what we use is the old topo drawings from 1996, which isn't any of this that you're going to see here, but I just want to bring some baseline to it. Because a lot of things happen in buildings that are cost that people don't even see. And the contractors had to have some ideas what we were asking them to do. So these numbers that we're going to share with you are very conceptual based on what was here, but we also gave them some information so they could really throw a little bit of a bigger target at the needs that are going to be there to do the job, right? Because we're not going to build something that we're going to say, oh, we should or we shouldn't have for an elevation issue. That creates so many ADA nightmares for a district, and we don't want to go in that regard.
One big thing that I mentioned that I know I just want to make sure Steve hits on is that a previous board, along with Steve, did a really good pre-thought about how you put in the plumbing, the underground.
Yes.
So the underground was already preset in back of the high school.
Correct.
So the question is, why not rebuild our existing locker rooms where they are? It's because of the distance from where that is to where the solid plumbing is at, which is in back. Why is the kitchen move from where it is to over here? Because all of this pre-work has been done. And you'll see it in back with that little piece of blacktop that's about this big. It's that line that runs that Steve was working on, was that 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Yeah, we did, when that basically happened when we did the construction of the science wing.
There it is.
And I just want to say about elevation, because it makes a big difference in your buildings. And why that comes to roost is exactly to this point. When we were looking at the old facility trying to figure this out, you know, what happened was in 96 when it connected into the building, we actually had the plumbing running the opposite way to a pit outside to a pump. So everything that went down had to go through a pump. Actually, you're pumped up 10 foot inside the wall, over the top of all the classrooms, go back down and try to get out to the street. That's a major problem, especially once you put science stuff, because we got chemicals and things of that nature. So at that point, that was an add to that project, but I said, you know, without working with the city where we could connect to, I made a determination that we're going to go from that spot all the way across and tie into the lift station. And that bought us a lot of safety net for later expansion. So those tie-ins are very, very important. So that's why we did what we did back then. It was good money spent no matter what. It functions great now and it gives you options later. So that's why what Dave is speaking to. Basically, we worked on the plan, which we just saw. There's lots of moving pieces to it. But I guess when you look at that plan, there's a lot of boxes that are shaded, and there's taglines on them, which means it gives you, to Dave's point, working with staff, things they might need, make tweaks and changes. The big thing, I guess, I just want to say to you folks, remember, you can't do anything without roof space. Without that roof, you don't have the floor space. You have to have that to manipulate your building, make changes, expansions. And a prime example, that would be, look at your tech ed department. If you walk into the metal shop right now, that is so tight in there. The woods is tight. It's very tight. It becomes unsafe at a certain point, right? So, you know, also, when we looked at this plan, in '96, you made an investment in some of your infrastructure and what can power what, where things are laid. So you want to connect to that, which means minimal cost to us to reconnect. So there's why some of the boxes got moved where they were, but I can talk to any one of you folks later if you have any questions. I don't want to get in depth with that right now. But I just want to just speak to the pricing. So we all know pricing has really jumped around in the last couple of years. So when I took the plan originally, when Steve and I looked at square footages and what we put together, that's what you see in educational facility in blue. You're roughly about 34,000 square feet. Right now it's about $400 a square foot. Depends what you're building. So about 410 is getting us in that ballpark. Remodeled spaces, about 18,783. If I'm looking at that properly. And remodeling depends what you do with it. We don't have a lot of heavy remodeling. So I was pretty comfortable with that 220 a square foot. I think that gets us in the ballpark. Because like I said, the old locker rooms that we would demo out of there, those become white boxes. And that all gets abandoned and taken care of. We do not want to rebuild on top of that space. It would cost you a fortune to do that. So that kind of limits some of our exposure cost on remodeling. Then reassigned and remodeling. There's some areas in there that are not heavy, but there are going to be some upgrades to that. And you know that's kind of the number we threw 180 at that. So totaling out, you know, we're looking at that, you know, 18 million, give or take a little bit. And that's just the cost of the work. Then we looked at the option of the athletic facility. If we were going to do something in that regard, what would that look like? Lots determined on basically what the site will allow us to do. And you have to make a determination too. Is it pay to do what you want to do for the space that you have? And you know, right now that would give you about 30,000 square feet of new gym space. Gym's around about 420 right now. Depends what you stick in them, what you want to do with it. So anyway, if you could scroll down a little bit more on that. Yeah, right
There you go.
Yeah. So, you know, we're looking at that estimated cost about 30,800,000, give or take a little bit of what that might look at. But remember, that's based on what construction numbers are looking at today. What tomorrow brings, we don't know. Some things are settling down, which actually would help, you know, but I can't speak to that. No contractor really can. So,
Just to put a fine point on how good a deal the middle school is, that was at 220 square feet.
yeah, we came at 220.
The new
Did
build?
we really?
Yeah, for the new building and the remodel
410.
portion, we were in for 220 a square
220
foot. We
square.
bid that at the perfect time to make that happen.
It's
We did,
doubled.
we really did.
It's
It is,
almost,
no,
it's doubled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
double.
I won't say double because there's a lot of remodeling to that,
Yeah.
but you're not gonna do it for 220 a square foot. It just ain't gonna happen. It'd probably be, I won't give them that.
Yeah, I just
that
want to give, because most board members here have been directly involved in that.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of phase 2, we'll be done with phase 3 by the end of summer, that was all at 220
Yeah,
square foot.
yeah, we're buttoned into that point, yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you look at the contractor estimates, we sent them that base plan that you gave with a limited amount of specifications, and that's why I have to say limited amount. We only spent so much time on what these facilities will be together and what's going to go into them. So they had a baseline to go around. That's why there's a fair amount of variance in how every contractor looks at that. But we use 3 reputable contractors. Elstone, or Else Construction right now, is our contractor on site working for us currently. HJ Findorf actually did a big chunk of work for us through the Nexus project. And Bolt Construction was very happy to come on board and take a look at that as well. So I think it's quite consistent when we look at the numbers as we average them out. And some contractors spend more time on that estimate than others. It's a time soaker for these companies to engage in that exercise. You know, to ask them is a big ask.
Yep.
And I would just say if this goes anywhere and people spend time, I would definitely like to see these contractors have an option to put a number to it, because they already have a number and time bid in this project. But I feel that our numbers, we're pretty clear what we guesstimated our estimates were going to be within a stone's throw. And you know, the last line there, of course, architectural engineering state approval plans, that's about 5.5%. That gets you where you're going to be spending for that work. And that varies on size and scope of a project. Larger the scope, those fees can go down a little bit. It's an estimated run number, and I think it's safe to look at that. But as we boil down, I think you can kind of see where we're shooting right now. It's at 20,252,000 and 10,047,000. So it's in the ballpark we guesstimated, and that was the piece that Dave asked me to put together for you folks. So you have, it just isn't me saying that I can generate any numbers you want, but I'm not writing the checks or doing that paperwork on their end. They are, and that's their business, and they're good at it. And I wanted contractors who would bid this and also be able to perform the work. So I think it gives us a nice snapshot, but just remember, that's a conceptual drawing that they saw. They didn't get a big spec book with all things we're asking, type of flooring, type of windows, and blah, 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 blah. We gave them some parameters to work around.
General.
Yeah, and that's the best anybody can do at that, but I think it gives the board a scope number, at least digest and look at and say, you know, we're in this realm. What this realm looks like depends upon what your needs are gonna be, what you wanna massage that plan to be. But I would just say, remember, that is 2023. So what a year brings, no one can speak to, but everybody's in the same boat. If you want to move forward, doesn't really make much difference, does it? You're going to have to work with a contractor and deal with numbers. But anyway, that's kind of where we lie. And the one thing I would say to you is wherever this goes, if there's this discern down the road, we want to do this, this, and this, we would put a hard pencil to that. We can massage things. The nice thing working with the system we have in place now is kind of like when the science thing rolled out. You know, we had $4.5 million, we got them for 3.1. I mean, it was a wonderful deal, right? Everything fell in place. But we also had one thing I will ask, and I'll always ask this of you, that we have leniency to control our finishes and take care of, you know, deck adds a different animal because of the fact you have high ventilation rates. Those are expensive areas to run because whatever you're bringing, you're exhausting, you got to heat that air back up. You know, there's cost to that. And there's ways of helping yourself. You know, we have a great manufacturer in town, Greeneck, and they make some great equipment that help in those manners. So we researched those as well to help contain our costs. But yeah, if you're in that kind of square footage, you know, you got to clean it, you got to heat it. You know, it's all those pieces of puzzle, and it also is going to put expense to you down the road because rust wear out. It's all those pieces. But I think standing back from just a standpoint, I'll just speak a second just about the trades because I came from that world as well. You know, everybody is really looking for labor out there, and kids be engaged in these things. You know, and you know, it's a big tech ed piece of this puzzle. You know, so I think there's a lot of benefits out there for our student body to be engaged in it. There's good income out there, and we need that work. You know, we cover a lot of the academic areas where we have set array. This is a spot that's basically got some holes in the net, and it's the point of choosing what you really want to do with it. So, I mean, like I said, it's diagrammic at best, but we wanted to maximize the site. I can't go any larger than what's there because I'm locked out with land. And we're pushing it to the exact limits that we could every area. One other thing I just want to mention too, safety, because on that plan we do talk about with the new kitchen. Our kitchen is 1960, it was original, right? That's our oldest kitchen, does the majority of the work. So, you know, the piece that, yeah, if you could just blow up on the kitchen part for 1 second. Yeah, a little bit more if you can. Oh, okay. So basically, where you can see all the tables and chairs, the round tables, the kitchen's north of that. That's a true servery kitchen and a nice layout. What you see in light area behind up top, you see the two semi trucks up there. There's space to get vehicles in there. Right now, when we have deliveries, you know, you have to realize all those trucks are driving through our parking lot with kids and people, and they're backing in the spot. That is a hazard. And the other hazard we have is refuge pickup. Those trucks got to come in too, and they got to back up. It's all blind spots. So when we laid out the other cafeteria piece of the middle school, we changed all that. Our deliveries to the street, we can drive in, get out. That's a safety mechanism that is, you know, I think well worth taking a hard look, no matter what you do, because that exposure for risk is going to come haunt somebody one day. And I think if we have an opportunity to correct it, or at least better that situation, I think that's something.
Yeah, Steve, Brad, and I were just talking about the culture change at the middle school already, with where the garbage is located, and trucks not having to drive through a play area.
Yeah, even our
in order
food
to
truck
pick up garbage.
we were always backing in there, just cringe when I think about that.
I mean, we've solved that issue.
When we did playground, oh my gosh, and try and corral the kids over to the other side so that nobody runs.
Right.
Well, it's like you can't do it
direction.
at night because they work during the day.
No,
Right.
and we try to bring the
Yeah.
trucks in early, but you know, think about this, you have exposure all the time because kids are in playground before
Yep.
school too.
Yeah.
You know, and to minimize that, I just think is good business.
Yeah.
It really is good business. And one more thing I'll throw out here, Dave, for just a second, because of the fact of the back, if you look at the woods at the top spot, in the back upper right-hand corner, and we look at doing the automotive shop next to that, you know, right now where they build the house, correct? And if you see in the light area, number right there, that would be the new platform to build your modular home. Right now, you think the kids are going across the parking lot, they're dragging tools across, you know, it's blah, 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 and people are parking there. It's really kind of a hazardous situation, and also we get nails in people's tires. It's just what it is. You know, that shape fits really well if you want to procure that, you know, process of building the homes, which I think is great for kids' exposure, and it's right out their door. The crane comes in, picks it off, and away it goes. We don't have to worry about that, but it's I think it works really well for the teaching standpoint. But like I said, that's the key of trying to slot all these things in. And the gym option is another option, of course, that we want to put on that puzzle because it was asked about from the public. What that looks like or how that changes it's a conceptual at best. But no matter what we do, whatever we build, if we build, that we have to have in the back of our forefront of our mind, what do we do for connections to all these items if you choose to move forward, whether it's now or later. We have to set you up that it's a plug and play. We don't want to set up later and have to put new services in and all things that go with that, because that means we have to get above all that building. That's going to cost a lot of money. So we really think about how we position ourselves in a build.
So
Anyway.
big picture, about 20 million for the academics and infrastructure changes, and 10 million for the athletic changes,
Give or take.
generally speaking. I say generally because there are some locker rooms built into that core 20 million. I mean, the locker
we
rooms
have to.
that
That
butt
has to
up
be done.
against the existing gym. You know, that's an
But-
important thing for the community.
Right.
The existing gym, it's a wonderful facility to have events. That is staying. That's not going anywhere.
Nope.
So there's a lot of work that's been put into that nice facility, that current gym. That's not going, that's, in no version of this is that being eliminated.
It actually becomes more usable, honestly, when you're done with it, because those spaces that encompass the perimeter of that space, they're going to get repurposed. Storage is always a problem, and I'll say that again and again because things always find their way in front of my exit doors, and I get rid of my fire department, and I go around. We just aren't built to handle the increase from 1965. Things have changed. But this gives us some flexibility, and I think that's a key point of all. It's all flexible spacing. How we play with it is another version, but I cannot move the little boxes on the bottom until the big boxes are built up top, and then the transformation happens. But it's very doable. It gives you options. So if anybody have another question, you can always give me a call later. I'm happy to take that call. But thank you for your time. Anything I can answer from anybody?
One thing I just thought about is there a way to tie in any kind of solar panels on the roof? Since the government's doing rebates, getting into all that.
Oh, sure. There's always options out there. You know, there's a lot of studies on you know, what the initial pay-in is to pay out, and so the board have to take a look at. There's cost to walk into that door. You know,
Sure.
so that's, you know, there's different grants and things of that nature. But you know, I can't say I've researched a lot of it. I've looked at schools that have had some of that. We have some currently on the pool roof. But you know, that technology is changing so fast. So what I tell you today, I don't know what it's going to look like in 2 years. What is changing, you know? But the thing about it is you're going to have that roof space, and you could always do things with that as well. But if intent is there to do that, I have to know that, because that changes my roof system and what I would do there.
It's a good question. Very good.
Yes, sir.
Not that you folks had time to do anything with this because it just came out yesterday, but there's I don't know the square footage, but Wisconsin Valley Lutheran School is now closing in next week. And that's in our school district. And that's a footprint that we ought to be able to at least be thinking about as we think about future facility needs.
I actually cold called them, and Steve and I and Christy, who's sitting in back, along with Rob, all who are here. We did go to the facility, and we were there about an hour and a bit. Met with the administrator, walked around, asked some questions, took pictures.
Yep.
I think Steve might even been on the roof.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I didn't see that, but I heard that.
that's true. Yeah.
I
No,
didn't see that part because we split up, but I
Yeah.
maybe
Maybe they
hear
did a
that.
Google or.
So we
Yeah.
did look at the facility. It was opened in 2004,
Yes.
and yes, that is now public. I've written about that in Board Connect. I'll have another article in Board Connect this week about that. But we did look at it. We did take a look at it.
Yeah, we did. So it's an interesting thought, because there's opportunities everywhere, and we want to make things happen. So, Timing in life is everything too, so. Any other questions I can answer you folks? All right, thank you for your time.
All right, and the third part of this presentation, Mr. Mullen from Baird. Mr. Mullen is a public finance expert, and there's a document in your folder. Is this your that Mr. Mullen? Yep, and it's up on the screen already.
Oh, sure.
So Mr. Mullen sent this today to kind of really expand on the document that was in the packet. So this is the same information that you have in your packet, but what Mr. Mullen did was expand on it in a wonderful way, actually. So I don't think he's going to hit every slide. He's going to give you an overview and then be available for questions from a finance and a debt perspective.
Yeah.
Mr. Mullen.
Thanks, Dr. Munoz. And so, as was just mentioned, this is a really detailed presentation, and I'm not going to go through it all, and also not going to make assumptions that you're going to go home right away and read it. But I do want to cover three big things. The first is just to talk to you a little bit about what the state finance puzzle looks like, and then talk about what you've done as a district, a lot like you've done with the physical plant, preparing for the future. You've done a lot of those things with your finances, preparing for the future, and I think it's important to understand what you've done and the opportunity that that presents you with. And then I want to talk a little bit about contextual information in terms of where you're at, both historically and with some of your peers with regard to funding and tax rates. And I think those three things are three big things that then kind of lead to the last piece, kind of the coup de grace, is like, all right, if we're talking about something in terms of $20 to $30 million, conceptually, broadly, how does that fit in with what we've done and where we've planned? So that's where I'd like to go with this. So the first piece, this is kind of our food pyramid for capital projects. And so we've got small projects at the top and larger projects at the bottom. Obviously, you as a board and as a district have tackled a lot of small projects. And you've done that with different tools that fit within the state funding formula. But as you start to move down that priority list, the way that you approach those projects starts to differ within the funding formula, because the state revenue limits what you can raise in terms of income from the community. So the state delivers to you every year, and you know this as a board, but they deliver to you what your maximum budget is. And then they tell you what you're going to receive in state aid, and what's left is what goes to your taxpayers. So that's one part of it. You as a board can go to your taxpayers and ask for increases for either operational needs or for borrowing. And if the taxpayers approve that, you can add that to your operational limit. And so presently, you're operating within that revenue limit, and you have some projects that were previously funded through referendum, through capital projects referendum. So that's presently where you stand. With most of the projects that you're talking about now, we're talking about the bottom part of this pyramid. And so when you think about the things at the top part of the pyramid, you can use operational funds, things that are presently within your revenue limit and within your budget. Whether it's fund balance or Fund 46 and 41, which are special project funds that if you have flexibility, you can set aside and squirrel away some money in. But those are things that are generally pretty limiting in terms of their size and scope for school districts in the state of Wisconsin, just because you're operating within a revenue limit, and that gets squeezed for operational needs. Down below, there are two types of borrowings that you can do. One is a Fund 38 borrowing, and what Fund 38 is, it's state code, state speak for inside the revenue limit. So even though it's a borrowing, it lives and breathes within your revenue limit, meaning if you've got payments there, they're actually taking the place of revenues that you could otherwise use for operations. And so you've used that very judiciously in a great way to fund some of your projects. You also have kind of a special Fund 38 loan, which is an energy efficiency loan, which even though it's technically a Fund 38 loan, it really lives and breathes a lot like a referendum approved borrowing. So once it's gone, it comes off your levy, similar to a Fund 39 or referendum approved borrowing. And so that's the last piece.
So our 38 debt is the Nexus debt, right? That's one thing. And the second part of 38 is the science building. The new science wing is in Fund 38, okay? So there was no referendum for that. That's non-referendum debt borrowing, essentially.
And then Fund 39 is what's considered referendum-approved debt, and that's generally what we're talking about here. Large project, you'd go to the voters and you would ask for permission to exceed the revenue limit, and the annual payments on that debt would be added to your revenue limit. They would be an add-on to your levy limit. When that borrowing is done being paid, it comes off your revenue limit, or not your revenue limit, it comes off your levy. It just drops away.
And our current Fund 39 debt is solely the elementary school. So we have a few years left, and I know we're coming up on that, but just so, especially new board members, the Fund 39 debt that we have still sitting there is a few years left of payments on the elementary school.
And so there are three types of referendum questions that you can ask to exceed that revenue limit. The first is debt, and the other two, over in pink on the right-hand side, are operational increases. There are two generally, broad operational increases that voters can ask for. One is a recurring, meaning that it goes on in perpetuity, $1 million, for example, that just lives as an add-on to your revenue limit forever, or a non-recurring referendum where you would ask your voters for operational increases, for example, $1 million for 3 years, and at the end of 3 years it sunsets, with the understanding that you're likely going to have to come back in that third year and ask again. The reason that I bring that up is that for smaller projects, that is a way. If you had operational needs and smaller projects, you could probably consider marrying those two things and ask just for an operational increase. But for large dollar amounts, that's really not practical. In terms of pass-fail rate, they're all roughly in the 70% range for the last 10 years, although this past referendum cycle that we just had, it was basically 50% pass-fail for these three types of borrowings. And just to give you a sense as to what's happening throughout the state, 10-year recurring referendums, that's the one that lives on in perpetuity, an operational question. They're the least popular, just because they have a slightly lower pass-fail rate. There are other reasons, I won't get into it right now. There are about 150 of those throughout the state for the last 10 years, and you can see where they've been at and where they've been successful. Non-recurring referendum, very popular. That's the one that sunsets. They've also had the highest percentage of pass rate throughout the state. Eyes are terrible, but roughly 460 of those throughout the state, and again, you can see where they've been approved. And then the most popular in terms of number of questions asked would be debt referendum, borrowings for capital projects. And I think it's really interesting when you look at this, not only from a pass-fail rate, but more so when you kind of put both the purple and the blue together. You were to kind of sketch in Highway 2. Everything along Highway 2 is, there's not been a need there. But south of that, it's almost everyone that has had to consider something in the last 10 years. Again, there's almost over 500 of those referendums that have been considered during that period of time. So let's just talk a little bit about your current tax levy, because I think that's important as we kind of move into the next part of the conversation. So we talked about the revenue limit. So presently, when you build your budget for operations, your total budget is more than 7.6 million. Michelle, do you have a sense?
Probably about 27.
That's what I thought, yeah. And so the state gives you a large portion of that in terms of state aid. What isn't funded through state aid falls to your local taxpayers, and that's the 7.6 million. So in pink, that's the portion of your levy that's for operations, mostly salaries and benefits, heat, those things, things that just keep the world going here. You also have some Fund 38 debt service in that number. You have a community service fund of $600,000, so that's a fund you can levy in addition to your revenue limit for the things that you operate that benefit the community as a whole, that aren't necessarily specifically education related.
So these are numbers specific to Mosinee, and the 600,000, just two big things, YMCA and our police services. So the YMCA and police services. There's more, but those are the two big things.
It's a great way to maintain those services for the community, but they're not specifically school related. And then the last piece is your referendum approved debt. And so last year in your budget, you had $712,000 for referendum approved debt. When you add those all together, it comes out to 8.9, almost $9 million. So if you take that $9 million total, those three things that taxpayers are responsible for, and you divide that by your equalized value, the total value of real property throughout the community, that's $1.4 billion in the community. Comes out to a tax rate of $6.33. So that's what the school portion of the tax rate is. So when you get your tax bill, obviously there are a lot of other, entities on the tax bill, but if you were to isolate the school portion, everyone in the community, everyone in the school district, based on fair value, would be paying $6.33. So if they had a home that had a fair value of $100,000, they would owe $633 for the year for school services. The reason that I kind of emphasize fair market value is because there was a very large increase in value throughout the state, and I'm sure here in the community. That was real growth, so it was, some of it was new stuff, probably 1 to 2% of it was new stuff in the community, but a lot of it was just growth in value. Your home is worth more than it was last year, but that's considered real growth, as opposed to an assessed value. So there's a difference, and I really don't want to go into all of that detail tonight, but there's an assessed value that each individual municipality assigns to property that they update periodically. It's usually once every 4 or 5 years. It's different than fair market value or equalized value. Schools are always denominated in fair market value or real value. So any questions with regard to that? I know I've gone through it kind of quickly, but I want to get to.
And this is our current mill.
This is your current mill rate, and this is your current
633.
budget. Yep.
That's our current mill.
So what does that look like for you on a historical basis? So, going back to 2018-19, over that, last 6-year period of time, that would be, the high mark for that tax rate, $9.42. And it's, generally declined over that period of time. So presently, it's substantially lower than it was last year. Your levy, I believe, was pretty constant year over year, last year and this year, meaning that the dollars that you asked for were basically the same year over year. Even though your equalized value went up, you asked for roughly the same dollars. You didn't have a lot of flexibility to ask for more, but you could have a little bit. And
Yeah,
so-
I've written about this quite a bit in the Mosinee link, that the mill has dropped over 30% in 4 years
Mhm.
here in the Mosinee School District.
So how does that compare to, how do you compare to your peers? So we guessed at who your peers are. Maybe you would have a different opinion. We basically included everyone relatively close, and then a couple that are in your conference that kind of look a lot like you. So obviously you are on the right side of that. You compare very favorably. Maryland and Anago are lower, and they have generally more property value per student than you do, and that's a big difference in that equation. Trying to think if anyone on that list has recently had a referendum.
Stratford did, they just passed an operational.
And there may be other peers that you would want to include in that list, but I think it's important to look at the neighbors just to get a sense as to what's happening in those areas around you. The other thing that I think is really important when you start to consider a large borrowing like this is your debt capacity or your credit limit from a state perspective. So by state statute, you're limited to the amount that you can borrow and the amount that can be outstanding to 10% of your full value. So this number is a little bit different than the number you saw on the prior page. This includes tax increment financing districts, TID districts. So that's part of your value, even though it doesn't necessarily offset your tax rate yet. So that $1.5 billion number is your total equalized value, including TID. 10% of that means that you could borrow almost $152 million. So we can expand that list exponentially. Just kidding. But presently you have $16 million outstanding of debt, and that would be Fund 38 and Fund 39 debt. which means that you have $135 million of de facto capacity.
That's good public finance humor. But the
If
good
there's such
point
a thing.
about that level of humor is that we have a very low debt, very low amount of debt in comparison to other districts in this situation, a very low amount of debt.
That's absolutely true. And that's why, you know, your tax rate is, you know, one of the reasons that your tax rate is low. So, I'm kind of doing this a little bit backwards, but we did some, you know, just some figuring in terms of what that, these two dollar amounts would look like if you were to borrow 20 and $30 million. And we used a very, very simple method for figuring that out. The state allows you to borrow for a total of 20 years and these are all listed in the assumptions below. State allows you to borrow for 20 years for a large capital project. That's your maximum borrowing amount. We assumed for a project like this, we would use all 20 years. It's a legacy type project. People in 20 years are going to benefit from it a lot like they're going to benefit from it today. So we assumed that the payments would generally be spread out over that 20-year period of time. You are presently receiving positive aid in the third tier. What that means is that the state breaks your aid into, you know, at certain spending levels, your aid percentage changes. There's a primary level, a secondary level, and a tertiary or third tier. We assumed that this payment would be funded in the third tier, just to be the most conservative estimate, but it's very likely that's the tier that it would be funded at. Presently, for every dollar you spend in that third tier, you get 15 cents back for every dollar you spend. So when you spend it, it runs through the aid formula, and then you get the aid basically a year and a half later. And so we timed the payments to kind of filter that in so that the net impact, because you've got your debt service payment, less whatever the state pays, gives you what is going to hit the levy. We've massaged those payments so that as your aid grows, your payments grow. So that the state, we're making those payments catch up to state aid, so to speak. And then we assume 2% growth in equalized value, so as your value grows at 2% a year, those payments could grow at 2% a year. That's based on 2% reflects new stuff in the community, not inflationary growth. So we're not saying, oh, well, you know, in Mosinee we expect home prices to go up by 50% over the next 3 years. So, you know, even though your home's worth $100,000 now, it'll be $150,000 next or in 2 years. We're assuming it's a level tax rate. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we assume that there's going to be like 2% a year of new stuff built here, or, you know, additions and whatever, and that's, you know, the growth that we're using. And then we assumed an interest rate of 5.25%, which is very conservative in the current interest rate environment. So all that being said, $20 million would increase your current levy for debt service by 33 cents, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then 30 million would increase your levy for debt service by 77 cents. So the first question that anyone that's critically looking at this is going to ask is, well, shouldn't 30 million basically be, or, you know, shouldn't that just be half as much more to get to 20, from 20 to 30? The reason that it's not is that, and we're gonna talk about that next. The reason that it's not is that we're taking advantage and talking about, like, you know, some of the planning that's been done, much like the planning that we did for facilities. We've been planning for an opportunity for referendum. So if you look at your current debt service payments, these blue payments, are Fund 38 debt for energy efficiency projects. I can't remember which specific project.
Energy efficiency and science, the science.
This is the science wing
Yeah.
and energy efficiency.
Yep.
So these are payments that, once they're done, will come off your levy. Your levy will decrease as a result of those payments. We also have existing referendum Fund 39 debt, that is this gray bar. We've been prepaying debt, and so after 2025-26, that debt goes away.
That's the elementary school.
And so what we've assumed is that these payments, this new payment, the blue payment, which is the referendum debt, the new referendum debt, will wrap around the opportunities. So as your current debt service is paid off, this new borrowing would wrap in behind it. So the level tax rate moving forward represents the difference between what you're currently paying for debt in your budget after aid of $1.10 to what it would cost you with that new project. So the difference between 110 and 187 is the impact.
This is how, when questions came up, I believe it was last school year, about how do we stabilize the mill rate, this is how. This is one of the very effective ways in order to, this mill rate that's dropped 30-some %, we want a stable mill. We want a stable mill rate over time. This is how to get that while sunsetting and paying off the elementary school, and at the same time having this project go on. It's how to do both.
Yeah. One other thing I want to point out is that this chart only refers to debt payments.
Yes.
The thing it doesn't refer to, what would be below here, is the rest of your levy, which is operational. You don't have a lot of control over what that does. So, as you know, the state presently is considering the new state budget. It's the biennial budget. And as it relates to school, if it had a shape, it would be shaped like a football. And when it bounces, we have no way of knowing which way it's going to go. So what I mean by that is that the governor has proposed increases to the revenue limit formula. The Senate has come back and said, well, we're not sure that those increases are really where we want to go. They might be less, they might be more, but we want to offset that with state aid. So we don't know what that all is going to look like. We'll hopefully know that at the end of June. But your operational levy is going to be your operational levy. And that's going to move how it's going to move, and it won't have any impact on this piece. This piece is much more certain. So that's, we'll focus our attention there.
What about questions? I mean, I think this has hit most of it, right, Mr. Mullen?
I think so,
Most
yeah.
of the big
Yep.
pieces. Obviously we can do depth later if we want to, but what about questions for a public finance and debt expert? Anybody?
I'm just curious, I don't know if you know this, do you know when the calculation is about $100 million that's in the TIF?
Yeah.
Do you know when some of that rolls off?
I don't, but let me, what I do know is that, so TID is helpful, but as it relates to, so the inclination would be, well, let's just say it's $100 million. That $100 million, if it comes off in 2028, is $100 million that gets added to your tax base.
Maybe we could take a half step back and explain what a TID is?
Sure.
Tax.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. So a tax increment district is a municipally created district, so the city of Mosinee has TIF districts, and they're special districts where, when they're created, think of nothing being in the ground, and the city says, all right, right now that property with nothing in the ground, no improvements in the ground, is worth $1 million. We're gonna borrow $8 million and improve this property, and with that $8 million, we hope that $20 million worth of stuff grows out of the ground as a result of that. Between now and the time that the TIF ends, that $20 million does nothing but pay back the $8 million of investment that we put in the ground. But after 23 years, that all collapses, and the $20 million that was created through this special district gets then spread out over all the tax base, and everyone gets the benefit of that growth.
So generally,
So it
a
creates
TID
jobs
is
and-
pro-business, TIDs are pro-business, it's a
Yes.
pro-business.
And, I think there's a misrepresentation that it takes value away from the school district. Well, I would say that it probably doesn't, because there was nothing there before, and this provides an incubator, and it's really, the community's job to make sure that really, that $8 million is going in to create something that otherwise wouldn't be there. It's an incentive that creates something that wouldn't be there. But when that that increased tax base comes off, and there probably is going to happen, that's going to happen certainly during this timeline, you would think that it would be a direct reduction in your tax rate. It probably won't be. And the reason is because the aid formula is based on value per student. So if you have relatively low value per student, and the reason I know, and when I say relatively low, lower than the state average, you'd get positive aid in the third tier. As you get more value, that percentage is going to go down. So if you get a windfall, when you get a windfall of value, it will be offset by a reduction in aid, all things being equal. So it's based on value per student. So if your students, if you get lower enrollment relative to the state and higher value, then that's helpful. But if that's where you're going, Kevin.
That was one of the questions. Could you go to the next page, please? Oh, whoever's got it. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, I know this is just a design, right? So, would we be precluded from, well, I guess I should ask the question about callable.
Mm-hmm.
Can we still do callable bonds?
Absolutely. And so,
Like 10 years or whatever?
yeah, so like the standard right now in the market, and this means that there's no additional interest rate paid by shortening the call. So what a call provision is when you borrow for 20 years, you tell the investors that buy your bonds that that interest rate is going to stay in place for a certain period of time. But after a period of time, you, the school district, has the right to prepay that debt. So right now, the standard call is 8 years out, 7 to 8 years. And you, your school district, has taken advantage of call provisions on your existing debt to prepay debt as you've had financial flexibility to do that. And I think it's created this opportunity.
Yeah, Mr. Mullen is referencing defeasance, and that we have defeased debt. In other words, it's exactly what was just explained.
Mhm.
That was done, I think, 2 years ago?
Yeah, and probably will be done again next year.
Right.
Mhm.
And so we would still be able to do that regardless of whether these bonds are callable or not. I mean, it would be the only reason to do it.
Mhm.
And the example up here would be based on the required amount, but we perhaps could do more.
That's correct.
And again, it's based on current rates, but
Yep,
who knows what it'll be by then.
yes.
Okay, those are my questions.
Yep, that's a great point, yes.
What, you said that the rates are conservative as
Yeah,
illustrated?
so,
What are they, about 4 7/8?
There you go. Glad you asked.
Sorry.
So, this is kind of an assumption of where interest rates have been over the last 30 years, not an assumption. So this is a basket of bonds, the highest rated municipal bond, a AAA rated bond, basket of bonds for a 20-year spot rate. The reason that I included it was I wanted to give you a sense as to where interest rates have been and where they're at. So looking back 30 years ago, back in 1995, we were topping out right around 7%. And I'm sure that you're all aware that, you know, we're coming out of a period in early 2020 and 21, where we were at historic lows for interest rates. And then the Fed, over here on the right, had begun raising Fed funds rates to increase interest rates. So I think the reason I wanted to show this is that, yes, interest rates have moved very dramatically from where they were at their absolute lows, but we're at a relatively average, slightly below average interest rate environment when you consider where interest rates have been over the last 30 years. And Kevin, to answer your question, if you were to borrow a 20-year, and you're roughly about a AA3
Yeah,
rated community.
we're not this low. This is top quality.
This is
right?
top quality, but you're, you know.
We're close, we're 2 down.
Yep.
I think.
So you would probably be right now today in the very high 3 to very low 4% range.
Thank you.
Today for a 20-year borrowing.
Thank you.
And then the last piece, and I'm not going to go into detail, is your referendum history, which I think is, you know, really helpful to take a look at. And then area school districts, people around you that have recently gone to referendum, and this is mostly geographic neighbors, just to get a sense as to what has passed and, you know, what those projects look like. Again, just tells you, gives you insight, and doesn't necessarily draw a straight line to anything. The last 2 pages, referendum statistics. Based on specific dates when the highest pass-fail rates occurred. So presently, the best time to go to referendum, based on these statistics, just simple pass-fail rates over the last, since 2020, or since 2000, would be November in a non-presidential election, followed very closely by a presidential election in November. So I think that kind of goes against conventional wisdom that, in November, everyone's at the polls, not just people that might be motivated by a school referendum. It actually works almost the other way. You get a lot of people out there that otherwise wouldn't go to the polls that maybe care, and, now have two reasons to go to the polls: presidential election, or, an election that they really care about, plus the school referendum, which they also really care about. And I guess the point is, you're going to do a very good job of getting your message out there and talking about a need if that's the direction that you go. I think it's really important to trust the public, and so whether you go in April or November, I think if you do a good job communicating, it doesn't really matter, but don't be afraid of the November date if that's, if you're concerned about numbers. And then election dates, you probably are aware of this, that school districts are limited in terms of when they can go to polls. In even-numbered years, you have a spring opportunity and a fall opportunity. There are 4 dates listed, obviously, in those even number of years, but you wouldn't do a February date and an April date. You would choose one or the other. Generally, people stick to the more popular April, November dates. And then in even-numbered years, you only have April or spring as an option. The other thing that's important to note about this is that if you're going to referendum, for example, in April of 2024, you have to pass your resolutions, meaning your board has to make a decision at least 70 days prior to that, which means that you're making a decision as a board in January, passing a resolution 70 days ahead of the vote date. That sneaks up on a lot of people because there's usually an awful lot of discussion that has to occur. And all of a sudden, it's Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and then the vote date, and you're trying to get facilities committees together. This is when you start to talk about that date heading into that January period. It really lays out perfectly. So, additional thoughts, you can take a look at that.
So we're well inside of any sort of timeline, which is reason why there's not a decision for the board to might only discussion, that, there'd be summer work, there would be fall work, with that deadline in January for a resolution.
So big pictures, if you don't mind, if I just touch on that, big picture would be, you're gonna spend the summer, if this is something that you're interested in, dialing in that need, right? And then making sure that your community is kind of on board with that need. That probably means you're going to potentially ask the community, based on your best thoughts, what you think the best need is, and put some numbers to that and some impacts to that. You can put it out to the community in the form of a survey and get input back to help guide your decision. If you're going to do that, which I would strongly recommend, you'd really want to do that in September, October, to have that information back in November to inform whatever conversation you as a board are going to have in December, so you're ready in January. November and December is a really poor time to be asking the public what they think about a referendum. They're distracted on other things, and it doesn't give you much time. So you're in a very comfortable position right now in terms of timing.
Thank you.
Any other
Thank you.
questions?
That's great.
Thank you.
Covered a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Moving on to the public forum. The public forum provides the public with the opportunity to ask questions about or address issues included on the school board meeting agenda. General operating rules of the public forum will be determined by the board president once the number of people wishing to participate is identified. Are there anybody wishing to speak for public forum?
Don't have any.
Okay, we will move on. Item 9, the consent agenda. At this time, I'd seek a motion, if nothing is going to be pulled from any of the agendas, to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion by Kelly. Is there a second?
I second.
And a second by Donna. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 10, discussion and possible decision, approval of the monthly vouchers list. We need a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the monthly voucher list.
Kelly's gonna do them all.
We have a motion by Kelly, is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Megan. Roll call, please.
Kelly Zebro,
Yes.
Bauman,
Yes.
Gorman,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Harmony,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Maple,
Yes.
Stankowski.
Yes.
Calandra Zebro.
Yes.
All yes.
Item 11, discussion and possible decision on the acceptance of the monthly treasurer's report.
I'll accept.
We have a motion by Peter, is there a second?
I'll second it.
And a second by Kelly. Roll call, please.
Hanson. Hanson,
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Harmony,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Maple. Yes. Stankowski.
Yes.
Calandra Zebro.
Yes.
Kelly Zebro.
Yes.
Bauman,
Yes.
Gorman.
Yes.
All yes.
Moving on to number 12, old business. 12A, discussion and possible decision on the approval of the second reading for new policies 4162 for controlled substance and alcohol policy for employees that transport students, and policy 8802, patriotic activities and observances. Again, this is the second reading, which was approved.
No changes since the
No
first one.
changes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Come on, Ken.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Peter, second by Kelly. Any questions? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 12B, discussion and possible decision, review of safe return to in-person and continuity service plan.
Yeah, we double checked with our nurses, but also the nurse consultants at the state. We do need to go through this approval, it's my understanding, one more time, in a 6-month cycle. There are no changes to this document from the last approval, the recommended approval of this
I'll make
document.
the motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion by Kelly, is there a second?
Second.
And a second by Amy. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion will carry with one no. Item 13, new business, discussion and possible decision acceptance of the Point Precision donation.
Yeah, Point Precision is donating $9,500 worth of aluminum and plastic. Per bird policy 7230, it's over $2,500. We do recommend approval of this generous donation.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve, and we'll do that with a thank you, I'm sure we do.
Yes,
correct?
already.
I'll second.
done.
Okay, we have a motion by Kelly and a second by Megan. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 13B, discussion and possible decision on the acceptance of ABC Supply Company donation.
Another generous donation from ABC Building Supply of $15,000 worth of vinyl siding, soffit, fascia, F-channel, drip edge, corner strips. This is over $2,500 and under the same policy, 7230. We are recommending approval of this generous donation.
I'll make the motion to approve the ABC building supply.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Peter, a second by Kelly. Any questions?
Where are we storing all that stuff?
That was part of the presentation. We're starting to get a little
Full?
full. That was the,
Because we were looking at the roof.
yes, we are full.
Any other questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 13C, discussion and possible decision on approval of the 2023-24 high school and middle school student handbook revision regarding plagiarism.
Yeah, this is artificial intelligence, so there's only the part in yellow for both the high school and the middle school, using artificial intelligence, AI, tools to generate classwork without teacher authorization. We are recommending approval of that addition, which would be plagiarism.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to accept the revisions.
Okay, we have a motion by Kelly, is there a second?
A second.
A second by Amy. Any questions? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 13D, discussion and possible decision, approval of the employee benefit for the 23-24 school year.
The employee benefits, there are no changes to the dental insurance and the vision insurance and life and long-term disability. So for the purposes of my comments, it's only as it relates to health insurance, even though it's in one document. Our increases initially were set at 10.75%, but we were able to, with our broker, to lower that percentage to 5.49%, which is a very good negotiations. We had to make some changes to the plan in order to get that. If we would have stayed with the identical plan, it would be 10.75%, which we do not recommend staying with the existing plan. So we had to make some changes. That's listed in the paragraph right above where it says Aspirus renewal with monthly employee rates.
Okay.
Right there with a 5.59 is outlined. So that's going to be where I focus that one paragraph. So the district share of $183,447 to be paid in premiums by the district and employees. The district share of the increase would be $150,528 more than what we paid last year, with the employees picking up any additional amount of $32,919. The total district expenditure for staff health insurance would be $3,169,904, with total staff expenditures for health insurance of $444,605. And the total district expenditure includes the same dollar amount of HSA expenditure. We are recommending approval of this. It is the best option that we have at this point. And this was worked through the health insurance committee. Question? Or you need a motion in a
motion?
second
Yeah.
before questions
Discussions,
or
yes.
discussion.
So I'm seeking a motion.
I'll second that.
Oh, I'm sorry, who made the first motion?
You gotta make the first glance.
Oh, okay.
Andrew made the motion.
I'll
make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion by Calandra and a second by Peter. Discussion.
Question?
Yes.
So, $32,900 represents about 17% of the increase, right?
Okay.
And yet, after the adjustment, the staff is covering 14.03% of the total cost. So my assumption is that the staff is not opposed to it, I'm just trying to understand it.
Mhm.
My assumption is that the staff is being asked to cover a higher percentage of the increasing costs than they have been previously. Is that the math that would support that?
Yep, Michelle is here. She's worked with our brokers and our insurance companies directly on this, so she can answer that
Yeah, I
question.
believe what the difference is, so the plan's increasing 5.1%, the regular plan. The other plan is not changing, but the premium is increasing by the 10.75%. So the people who choose that Freedom Plan are paying what they would pay on the regular plan, plus the difference, the increase in cost on that to get that higher plan. The district only pays the 88% of the premium on the regular plan, the 2,000, 4,000.
Okay,
And then the employee who chooses the Freedom Plan picks up the difference.
so can't people change plans from year to year?
They can change,
So you're
yes.
just estimating based on,
That is correct, if everyone stayed where they were.
so we don't know,
No, we'll be opening this up for, if the board approves it for enrollment. People can change it.
so is the total district expenditure for the staff health insurance $3,169,904 regardless if all of the staff switch to a different, to one or another plan? Is that the
That
cap?
is correct.
So, we're okay,
The
so,
district's share, yes,
so the staff shares,
could change.
Could
If they
change.
choose the Freedom Plan, yes.
because the total cost could be more than $183,447, right?
Yes, if
Okay.
you had another 10 people go over to that other
I
plan.
just was making sure that there were
Yes.
assumptions there, that's not
Yes.
that we shouldn't be thinking that those are locked in. The only number that's locked in is the 3.169,904.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question. So you said this ran through the health committee, so then I'm assuming that the majority of the staff that are in support of this, how many other, businesses do we go out to, or health providers do we go out to solicit to for insurance?
Yeah, we went out to bid and for lack of a better word, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle.
Last year.
Last year. And there isn't, based on our based on our ratios, this is really the one way that we can go.
Okay.
Meaning there's other options if we have different numbers.
Right.
I'm just trying to say things correctly. There's other options that would be available to us with consortiums if our numbers are different.
Right.
One of the issues in this renewal was that we had a very short window from when we made this transition to now. It was 6 or 7 months.
6 to 8 months.
Yeah,
Initially
6 to 8 months instead of a whole year of experience is the issue, one of the issues that we had to contend with. And that's how we got, reworked the plan. So
next year, we may have a better option for going out to get perhaps better bids.
yeah, I think we're gonna have more experience, which is good. I think more experience is good. And we're always looking at those potential options with M3. I mean, one of the markets that M3 has is working with multiple districts. We're in a unique situation in that we're a pretty large district compared to the districts that get into consortiums. I mean, there's 7, 8, 10 districts, local districts here, that have a really competitive situation because they pool together, and all together they're larger than Wausau. Whereas our experience, we're sort of sitting alone because we're large enough and we have our numbers the way that they are, that aren't necessarily appealing to groups like that. Did I cover that pretty well, Michelle? I mean, because
Yeah.
we've sat in, and Michelle has sat in for a whole year on consortium meetings in the hopes of us having that opportunity, because that is one of the big benefits of M3, is that they have, we know that, and self-insuring. I mean, there's an opportunity for self-insurance, we looked into it, but you gotta have stop loss, stopgap, and it's like $1 million just for that. So it's just not affordable at this point, but it may be in the near future. So these are options that we're looking at.
Are there laws requiring us to provide health insurance?
Yeah,
I don't want staff to be like, oh, he's.
yes.
We wouldn't, there's a few, we've talked about that before, there's been ideas floated.
No, it's a fair question, that the Affordable Care Act, because we have more than 50 employees, there's certain minimums that we have to have.
Okay.
So, and there's certain restrictions about what we can do based on the Affordable Care Act and other things. So, yes, and we believe it's a good benefit, we still think this is a good benefit, but we do want to be looking at multiple options. I mean, two of the big things to kind of be asking about in the future are consortiums and also self-insurance. I know that might be scary a little bit, but a lot of districts do it, and it is insurance, it's just how you go about it, cutting out the middleman. I'm not saying we're going in those directions, but those are things to ask about in the future that we're always sort of watching.
Megan?
When you say self-insurance, would you be referring to, like, let's say we go to Aspirus and we just purchase directly from them? Or what do you mean by self-insurance?
Yeah, I mean, self-insurance, the way it works in the current market is you still have insurance per se. It's how it looks from the payer side. So right now, I mean, we have Aspirus, but we're paying them to pay other people. Even though, you see what I'm saying? So we're paying them 3.1 million or whatever it is in order to write checks for us, when we could just write the checks ourselves. So there's a savings to self-insurance. I'm not saying it's the way to go, because one of the problems, we've looked into self-insurance, is you have to have stopgap. So there's gonna be, I mean, the last time we looked, I think it was $1 million. I mean, I think we looked at it and we actually priced it out, and when I saw the $1 million, I said, okay, put that away, we don't wanna talk about it, don't even take it to anybody. I mean,
With $3 million in our budget, and a 30% loss ratio, that's $1 million right there.
yes,
Right.
100%.
My other question would be, have we looked into options like Astia Health and what some of the other like corporations are doing? Are schools starting to venture into that route where, you know, they just put up a new Astia clinic in Schofield and it's kind of trying to, I guess in some, dismantle the monopoly that Security Health and Marshfield Clinic holds versus what Aspirus Arise and Aspirus Health, right, to try to dismantle that. Have we looked into that option where we would cover like major medical, high deductible from Security or Aspirus, but then our basic things would go to Astia, which kind of cuts them out of that?
I can get back.
We are looking into those,
Oh.
yes.
I feel like that could be, because when you see these numbers, it's just like.
Every
so-
year we
it's a
go,
lot.
don't we? Every year yeah. I
Yeah.
remember doing this last year.
Yeah, I think one of the things to look at big picture here is if we're at 5%, even 10%, we actually would have been happy with, because
Oh, yeah.
the averages out there
Yeah.
are anywhere from 15 to
Yep.
25% for
Less than
increases.
10 is good.
So we're actually, we would have been happy with 10.
Right.
And to get it in a range of 5 with some changes.
Okay.
There's always a possibility, I wanted to bring this up and make sure that this is public, there's always a possibility once the state settles its budget, let's say they settle the budget really positively, right? Let's just all be positive. But if they settle it really positively, we may be sitting in a beneficial situation where we look at the HSA and say, all right, let's increase that. That's something that we could still do in the next 3 months, 4 months before we get to our October meeting. So, and that would directly affect and help, you know, the increases and the offsets. So that is a decision that we just don't know where the state budget's gonna be at like right now. I mean, think back to the Barrett presentation, I think he did a really good job of that. It's a wild card right now with the state budget, but it is every 2 years. And once that's settled, we can always think about that HSA.
Kevin?
Real quick, isn't the program you were asking about, that's a program where the employees don't get to pick their own doctor?
Thinking it's like a clinic on site and you go to that one, that's correct.
Right, so, okay.
It's something like that, and then anything that requires, it would be like your primary care, you know, I fell down and I hurt myself, I need to have an x-ray, that sort of thing. Any person who needs care beyond that, you would go to your referral at either, you know, your specialty
But you would get your own
provider.
doctor?
Correct,
Your primary care physician
Correct.
would be replaced through that system?
I believe so.
Okay, so I think that right now, if 10 of our employees are already choosing to go the Freedom Plan, that's the one where you could go anywhere, right? So that's about 8 or 9% of our employees, 7 or 8%, so it would be interesting to see what the
Yeah, I
staff
agree
would
with
do if they
If given that
couldn't.
choice, yeah.
Right.
Any other questions? Donna?
There is also a new doctor in the business over in Weston, in that business park or that industrial park back there. And he offers $85 a month for as many times as you come in for a family. And then he has a supplement insurance that you can get for anything major medical. Or you can have your own other plan for major medical. But that's something new that some of the doctors are starting to do is start their own practice.
Okay.
And then they offer like a monthly rate per family. And then they also offer an insurance beyond that for major medical.
Yeah, that's new. Right. Any other questions?
My last thing would be, I feel like when I started, we were with Ansay and Associates, and then that year our prices skyrocketed. We backfilled it with like 300 grand into an HSA, and so then we changed to M3. I'm wondering now, looking forward, should we shop around again in terms of that? Other than something to look into.
That's our broker.
Yeah, our broker, right? But I feel like we had a major price decrease when we went from the deal that was brokered from Ansay versus the deal we got from M3, and that's ultimately why we switched.
And we could always look at our broker.
Right. Okay. All right, we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 13E, discussion and possible decision approval of the 22-23 budget changes.
Let Michelle take this. Michelle, why don't you go right ahead?
Each spring, we look at our budget and see where maybe our budget projections were over or under in each area. When you adopt the budget in the fall, you adopt it by function, and we have to stay within those functions. Our auditors look at that and they recommend, as does the DPI, that in the spring we relook at our budget and see where we need to make adjustments. So in looking at our budget and projecting out what we plan to spend between now and the end of June on salaries, busing, food service, those things, I have went through and projected what our new budget amount should be in each of those functions. And as you see up on the screen, the function is like the purpose, 120,000 is undifferentiated instruction, like math, science, those types of things. So I've listed the functions, and then the approved budget that the board adopted in October, and then the proposed change, the new budget amount, and then the reason for the change. Projections don't always come true. Sometimes they're higher, sometimes they're lower, oftentimes due to benefits and salaries, substitute costs, and then also where we code things. Something may come in, we budgeted in one area, but really we need to code it in another function. So those changes, I'm netting those to zero with the transfer, any money coming out, filling those spots in other areas, and then increasing the transfer to Fund 46 by $275,000 to help pay for the cafeteria and remodel of the middle school.
Yeah. Couple big things stick out to me here. The
Okay.
Fund 46 transfer, but also the open enrollment out costs are lower. So you'll remember from our October meeting that our open enrollment out versus open enrollment in over the last 4 years used to be about a negative 120. We're about even right now. In other words, just as many coming in as going out, which is the reason for the over budgeting in the 43,000, the last line there, which is very good.
Are there any specific questions?
Great. Make the motion to approve the revised budget.
Okay, we have a motion by Peter, is there a second?
I'll second it.
And a second by Kelly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 13F, discussion only, administrative guidelines for policy 5500, student code of classroom conduct.
And Chris, if you could just jump into the first link there. The second link is the existing policy, but we're just gonna spend time on the administrative guideline. The administrative guideline, I've run through Neola and I've made this active. In other words, this is now an administrative rule that's active, but we can adjust it. I'd have to run it through Neola if we make adjustments, but right now, just based on making some clarity with respect to classroom conduct, about how we go about doing this. In other words, administrative rules or administrative guidelines, when administrators are going about handling situations, let's say suspensions or bus issues or in-school suspensions or anything related to school discipline, or classroom code of conduct, this would be a guideline that exists for them to follow. And it's more specific than a policy, and it goes very, it's very scripted in terms of how this works. So according to the way our policy structure is set up, I can action an administrative rule without board approval, but I wanted to make you aware of it and get feedback, if any, about any changes or recommendations. Once again, we do work with Neola on this so that it's directly aligned to our existing policy, which is the second document that's linked in there, the classroom code of conduct.
Again, this is just for more clarity.
Yeah,
Correct.
just more clarity, more specifics.
Very more specific.
Yeah, a lot more.
It is, it is.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's what administrative rules do.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and it was just discussion only.
Yep, I've already made that active, but I can make adjustments with any administrative rule kind of on the go.
Okay.
Okay, any questions? Okay. Moving on, item 14, other reports.
Okay, and that would be me. And we have a spring workshop that there's 5 of us that are going to attend. We decided instead of driving to Tomahawk, we're gonna do it down here, I believe. And it will be Diane, myself, Jessica, Megan, and Calandra. I don't think I left anybody out on that.
What is it?
That's the spring workshop. And then we also have in July, coming up, the 14th and the 15th, that'd be Friday and Saturday, a workshop in Green Bay. And it covers quite a few, they have breakout sessions in that, so if anybody's interested in that, let Amy know. And I believe, Amy, that's all I have. Okay, good.
What date is the actual one for Tomahawk?
It was the 18th, but it was canceled because there weren't enough people registered.
Yeah.
So then they
So
switch.
That was the
That's why they're
18th,
doing
so
that.
Oh,
now
so,
we're-
okay,
this
that's
is
the
gonna
next
be
one.
right here.
So we're gonna do,
Yep. And I'm sure you could add Peter on that.
well, I just wanted to see the
Yeah.
date that you guys.
What's it
are
called?
doing
It's the 23rd.
It's the 23rd,
Next
Tuesday. It's 7 to 8:30. And it's government, elements of government. It's an in-person workshop. So we'll be here, right? Amy?
that. But there's a cost per
Yep.
board member that would
Yeah,
go?
65 per person.
Yeah,
We could
it's-
sneak
Okay,
it in.
I'll
Yeah, how do they
I'll
know?
look at that.
They won't, will they, Amy?
What's that?
Amy said,
Because
how will
we're
they
an
know? I
honest
said, they
group.
won't, will they? If they're two extras.
Just look at your participation points that go towards your pins.
Oh, there you
Oh.
go. Yeah.
That's true.
You're not gonna get your words, give it to me. I need more.
Okay,
And that concludes my report.
And I would be there, but I'm at a soccer game in Rhinelander.
What's that date?
The 23rd.
3rd.
It's Tuesday, Tuesday,
7
next
o'clock.
Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, it'll be
Next Tuesday.
at 7 o'clock.
Yep. Okay, item 14B, CISA.
The minutes for the April meeting were in your packet, and so far they don't have any of my information yet, so.
We'll
So
forget
for
on that.
right now,
That's it.
I have nothing more.
Thank you. Item 15, future agenda items. Is there anything that needs to be coming back for next month?
I don't.
Okay. Item 16, movement into closed executive session. The board will convene into closed executive session pursuant to section 19.85, paren 1, paren C of the Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of discussing administrative contracts. I would need a motion to go into closed.
I'll make the motion, go in closed session.
Okay, a motion by Kelly, is there a second?
I second it.
And a second by Donna. Roll call, please.
Kelly Zebro.
Yes.
Bauman.
Yes.
Gorman.
Yes?
Hanson.
Yes.
Hermany.
Yes.
Kaiser.
Yes.
Maple.
Yes.
Stankowski. Yes. Calandra Zebro.
Yes.
All yes.
Okay. And we are in closed.
We take a break, 5 minutes.
5-minute break.
7:45.
Sounds good.